Hello and welcome back to my channel. 3 years ago, I promised a little girl that I would take her to Disney World when she turns 8. That would have been this year. However, since things have happened, we cannot go. But I am still going to make her princess dresses that I promised. So this is the first one of the series, and it happens to be Snow White. So this week, I'm going to show you how I made Snow White. For the skirt, I found this rose gold material, and I used 1 yard and created a simple skirt by gathering the top of it and attaching it to a waistband. I ripped this yard of fabric in half and then I attached them at the sides. I did add a second underlayer with this light yellow material and adding some lace that I was given by my grandmother. For the bodice, I did find this choir gown that I thought would work well. However, when I started sewing on it and everything else, it did not look really good. It was very cheap. So later on I do replace the material with a better quality blue. Here I'm just taking apart the choir outfit to use. For the bodice pattern, I do make my own patterns with the mannequin I have, and it consisted of a solid front piece and 2 back pieces, and I do cut a lining as well. For the sleeves, I cut this shape out and I cut 2 of them. And for the cuff of the sleeve, I just cut 2 long rectangles. In my original design, I had the leftover interfacing part of the choir robe that I was going to add to the zipper area to give it more structure. But since I scrapped this bodice out, I went ahead and actually put interfacing in throughout the entire bodice. For the skirt, I just kept them as long rectangles. I had this gold and cream lace that I thought would be kind of cute to incorporate in this. So I am adding this to the bottom of the yellow material. My grandmother a couple years ago had given me a whole tub full of lace that she's had for years. And why not use them on princess dresses? For the outer layer of the skirt, I take the two panels of the rose gold material. I do sew the side seams up, and then later on I do cut one of the panels down the middle to make a back seam. And before that, I give it a quick hem. It's easier to hem it as one long rectangle before you attach the waistband. So I'm just measuring up 2 inches and folding it up from there. And since I use my serger on all my projects, I do not have to worry about the fraying edges. Here I'm just cutting one panel in half to make a back seam. For the waistband, I just cut a 4-inch wide strip of fabric and I add interfacing to it to give it some structure. This waistband will overlap itself with some hook and bars later on. I measure out the middle of the waistband and then I measure out the middle of the skirt and I gather the skirt up and attach it to the waistband. And I do the same thing with the yellow underlayer. With the front part of the waistband on, I do fold it over in half over the raw edges of the skirts, and I do hand stitch that on. I believe it's called a small whip stitch. With the waistband fully on, I go ahead and I do close up the back seams to both skirts with leaving about a 6-inch gap at the top so that way my daughter can get into the skirt. And with these dresses, I do make sure that I leave enough room in the waistband and the hems so that way as she grows, I can let it out and she can still wear it. And for the closures, I just use hooks and bars. For the bodice, this is actually the new material that I use. I do serge every single edge and I do line it with interfacing. Here I'm just recutting the cuffs and the sleeves and then adding the interfacing to the cuffs. For the red accent color, I used this red material that I got from my neighbor that she was getting rid of a lot of stuff. So I took it all and I made these teardrops shapes. And I cut 6 of these shapes and for 3 for each sleeve. Once I serged all the edges of the teardrop shapes, I went ahead and placed them on my sleeves. I did fold down the edges and top stitched them on. And once each teardrop shape is on, I go ahead and fold them in half and I sew a dart on the tops and bottoms. With the red teardrop shapes on, I go ahead and gather the bottom of the sleeve up to the sides of the cuff. And then I sew on the cuff to the sleeve. With the cuff attached, I go ahead and fold it in half and sew up the seam. I do fold the excess material of the cuff up over the seam on the inside, and I do hand stitch that down. And now it's time to create the bodice. I take the front pieces and the back pieces and sew the side seams and shoulder seams up. With the bodice, I did originally make it into a one piece, but I do cut it down in half later because I did not realize there's actually a seam down the front of Snow White's bodice with gold trim. And for the gold trim, I use this gold ribbon that I use that front seam to attach it to, and I just hand stitch this on. And with that done, I go ahead and attach the lining to the front material. And I sew along the top and the bottom of the lining and the front bodice material. I make sure I leave the sides open so that way I can flip it and add the zipper. I do clip the curves and I cut the points on the bottom of the bodice so that way it lays smoothly. For the zipper, I do use a separating zipper, and I go ahead and fold the sides of the bodice and add the zipper tape in between the lining and the outer material. I do buy long zippers just so that way I make sure I have long enough zippers, and I do cut them down and then I give it a good stitch on the end so the hole does not come off. And then I just sew the zipper tape in between the bodice and the lining material. Now it's time to attach the sleeves. I do gather the top half of the sleeve to make sure it fits in the armhole. And with that, the bodice is pretty much done. The last thing to do is make her collar. This one was, I think, the trickiest part of the entire outfit. I used 2 pieces of white cotton and 2 pieces of thick interfacing to make sure it was sturdy enough to stand up, and some of that white and gold lace that I used on the bottom of the skirt, and some bias tape. I first off created this half moon shape with a dart in the middle. And then I sewed up the dart. And then I pleated the white and gold lace around the edge of the collar, and I went ahead and did a stay stitch on that. And then I went ahead and put right sides to right sides, and I sewed the collar together. And I made sure I left the bottom open so I can flip it. I do add bias tape to the bottom edge to hide the raw edges. And to attach it to the dress, I went ahead and used sew-on snaps. I added 6 sew-on snaps to the bodice, the inside of the bodice, and I attached their counterparts to the collar. And with that, and creating a red hair bow for the outfit, the costume is done. I think it came out really well, and this was actually surprisingly very easy to make. This costume with all the materials and everything cost me approximately $15 to create. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you next week. Bye!